Hello and
Cool.
welcome to the latest episode of Flamingo's Resident Engagement and Experience podcast. The guest today is Josh Murphy, and I'm really excited to have him on because of his I'll say what stood out to me when your LinkedIn profile popped up was how quickly you have risen in the multifamily industry. And I think it's really going to be very beneficial to a lot of people to hear about how you approach your career development, what got you into property management, and then what you actually do, and then kind of talk about other things, including a resident engagement, experience, and your overall view about the property management industry and where it is going. So
Yeah, of
let's start
course.
on the career side. So you've been in the industry for about 15 years and you started in leasing. So kind of let's learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I started in the industry, like you said, about 15 or so years ago. I'm originally from Texas, born and raised. I am now in New York City. But really, how I started, I would say a lot of people say that they fell into property management. It's like, oh, I just
Mhm.
stumbled upon property management. I can probably say that that did not happen for me.
Oh, really?
When I was a kid, I would want to, yeah, I would want to go see like model homes and stuff with my
Yeah.
parents. They reminded me of that all the time. So real estate's always been really in
Oh,
my blood.
wow. I can
Um,
say you are the
yeah,
first
but
person I have spoken to about this that said they actually planned to be in real estate. Like legitimately the first.
I
Wow.
I love everything real estate. For some reason, I actually started doing real estate, selling homes and things like that
Hmm.
when I was like 18, 19 or so. For some reason, I navigated towards the property management side of it
Hmm.
and it just stuck. Everything about it just
Nice.
stuck for some crazy reason. So yeah, I didn't just stumble upon it. Hard times came on doing real estate. It was like
Yeah.
2007 or so with the market crash. So I was like, I
Hmm.
need some more consistent income.
Yeah.
So the building I was living in, they obviously manage other buildings in San Antonio, where I'm
Hmm.
from. And I went to the office to pay my rent one day, and they were like, "You would be great as a leasing agent." And I was like, I know I would." So I submitted my application, my resume. I
Hmm.
got the job, and really that's how I started as a leasing agent. It was good. It was so much fun. It was so different than real
Hmm.
estate and selling houses because
Yeah.
you deal with these people. Now we call them residents, but you deal with
Hmm.
these people all day, every day. You work where they live. It's just this
Yeah.
weird dichotomy of like professional and personal at the same
Hmm.
time. So that's how I started. It's funny. I started with this one company, and then about a
Yeah.
month and a half later, a new company, big national company, came in to like purchase the
Oh,
building. So
wow.
I was nervous. Yeah, I was nervous to not have a job. And I was like, I
Yeah.
got this for more stability, and now this whole thing is going on.
Oh, so did they
But I
let go
met
of
with
all the current staff then?
so it's funny because the old company who was managing the building, they didn't want to
Hmm.
keep any of the current staff. So they're like, with the new company, they're
Gotcha.
like, sure, take them. I remember
Huh.
my new boss coming on, and it's funny because she and we worked together for 10 years after
Hmm.
that. But she told me, she's like, the company didn't really want to keep you guys. I see something with you guys,
Oh,
and I
wow.
think you're gonna do great things. So I'm gonna move. She moved me to another building,
Hmm.
all that good stuff. But that's kind of how I started as a leasing agent in San Antonio. I
Yeah.
eventually worked my way up to leasing manager,
Hmm.
which again, it's just a glorified leasing agent, but
Yeah.
still a good transition into more of a leadership role, which is necessary for those that want to be on an upward trajectory. So I
Yeah.
was a
So
leasing
question.
manager. Yeah,
Oh, yes. No, sorry to interrupt, but question in terms of
go
one
ahead.
thing that's always interesting to me. So I assume you kept living on site when you did get the job. Like, what are your views
Yeah.
on living on site where you kind of live where you work? I say that now for a lot of people out there that are
Ooh,
not in real estate, that where the pandemic has kind of forced everyone to work, live, work out, and sleep where you are. For real
yeah.
estate, for property managers, it's a pretty common thing that I've noticed that a lot of property managers do live on site. So, what are your views on that, and how was that?
Um, it started off very well, and I lived on
Hmm.
site because I got a rent discount. I think that's kind of
Yeah.
the consensus with a lot of people
Hmm.
in the industry is you live on site, you get a
Hmm.
discount. The commute's really easy, obviously, because
Yep.
you just walk to the office.
Yeah.
But I knew after a certain amount of time, after I had moved up the ladder, gotten a few
Hmm.
promotions, still lived on site. When a resident came to my door, knocked on my door
Hmm.
saying that they found somebody's keys in the parking lot, and I was like,
You knew it was time to
take
move
them to the
out.
office. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. That's back when we had drop boxes. I was like, put it in the rent drop box, and we'll deal with it tomorrow. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's 9 o'clock at night. So if it works, if like financially living on site is that's
Hmm.
what you're looking for, is for some relief with rent, and your
Hmm.
company and ownership offers a rent
Yeah.
discount, then hey, I'm all for it. But me
Yeah.
personally, after that moment when people were knocking on my door, I was like,
Yeah.
all
I
right, I
can't
got
do
to
it.
get out. It's time to go.
Yeah.
It's time to go.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then, so when you did get promoted, what differences did you see between being a leasing agent and being a leasing manager? I know you mentioned that there really isn't that much of a difference, but I assume there is a little bit more leadership potential or leadership responsibilities.
Yeah, there isn't much of a difference, but then again, there is, because as a leasing agent, I was, essentially, I was peers. I was essentially friends with all of my
Mhm.
leasing counterparts. So we would just, kind of just run the gamut and joke and do all of our stuff. And then when I got promoted to a leasing manager, it was with that same team.
Mhm.
So kind of having to shift the mindset of, hey, I'm your peer, to now
Yeah.
I'm your supervisor. It's different, but I think that's one thing that's not taught. I think that's one
Yeah.
thing that people just inherently know is leadership skills and leadership ability. There are some things you can learn, but that's
Mhm.
the biggest difference, is separating yourself from like hanging out after work all the
Yeah.
time, drinking with your leasing agent friends. Now you're their supervisor. You can't
Yeah.
necessarily do all that. So that's the biggest shift. And then delegation. That's when I
Yeah.
learned how to start delegating. As a manager,
Gotcha.
I was overseeing three other people, so I
Mhm.
can't do the job of three people plus my own job. So
Yeah.
delegating tasks down and then following up with those people to make sure the work's been done. That was the biggest difference from leasing agent to
Yeah.
leasing manager.
Got it. Then at this point in time, was the promotion a surprise to you, or was it something that you were actively working towards? Like you had a plan, I'm a leasing agent today. In a year, 2 years, whatever it is, I want to be the leasing manager. And if so, like how did you kind of plan that out or think about it?
Yeah, I think at that time I wasn't really setting goals as far as like this year I'm going to do this, next year I'm going to
Hmm.
do that. I knew where I wanted to be. I was never thinking about being a leasing manager. I knew that was the
Hmm.
step, but my goal was always to be a property manager. Even as
Got it.
leasing, I was like, I want to be a property manager. Whatever that
Hmm.
looks like and that pathway, that's what I
Hmm.
want to do. So the leasing manager promotion, it wasn't a surprise to me. It
Yeah.
was one step that I knew I had to make in order to get to that property manager level.
Hmm. Got it. And then is that typically the case where to get to the property manager level, you do have to go through that direct path, whether it's to leasing, leasing manager, assistant property manager, and property manager? Is that the typical path? Or if someone out of college or new to the industry wants to go from to be the property manager, like what path would you recommend?
Yeah, it's not necessarily that path. I think it depends on the company that you're with, the size of the company, and the
Hmm.
positions that they have. Typically, you go from leasing agent to assistant manager to property manager. I've seen many people, my best friend actually, and future business partner, went
Hmm.
from leasing agent to leasing manager, skipped over
Hmm.
assistant manager, and went to property manager. So I think it just all depends on your skill set. A lot of
Yeah.
people who are leasing agents and leasing managers are people if that makes any
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
We enjoy interacting with people. When you get to that assistant community manager role, you're the bad
Mhm.
guy. You're now sitting
Yeah.
behind a desk on a computer, pay your rent. If you don't, we're going to go to
Yeah.
eviction court, all that kind of stuff. That's not for everyone. So
Yeah.
that path, it might be typical, but it's not for everyone.
Got it. But do you feel like that is necessary? Like, do you become a better property manager by going through that path, or are there just like multiple ways to go about it?
I do think it's beneficial per
Hmm.
se to have that assistant manager responsibility at least for 6 months, just to
Hmm.
kind of get in, learn the position, see what goes on. Because to be a good leader, you have to be able to know what the people below you are going through. If you
Yeah.
don't have that experience ever, you're not going to be able to relate and coach and offer advice for that
Yeah.
position if you've had no experience with it. So yeah, I would say for those looking for that path to a property manager and
Yeah.
beyond, it's beneficial to have the assistant manager duties, whatever that looks like, but have assistant manager duties and title at
Yeah.
some point in that path.
Got it. And then so that's kind of where after you became the property manager, you were there for a few years and then made the jump to Odin. And that's where when you
Yeah. So
became a
listen,
senior property manager.
I was an assistant manager for like 8 months. I
Yeah.
hated the position. That's
Oh,
why I can
really?
talk like that. I did
Yeah.
not. I did not enjoy being an assistant manager. To be honest, I wasn't very good at being an assistant manager.
Yeah.
But again, that was part of the path that I knew I had to take to become
Yeah.
a property manager. So became the property manager. A lot of transitioning happened with company sales and things like that.
Hmm.
Went on to a company called Odin Hughes. There was a
Hmm.
management division for about 4 or 5 years or so, um, that just started after Greystar acquired Riverstone Residential Group. For
Yeah.
those in the industry, they probably know all of this information about Greystar and Riverstone, so I can say those things. But yeah, I went to Odin Hughes as more of a senior property manager. I was the first property manager really on a third party deal. So
Hmm.
the owner didn't manage, it was managed for a different ownership group
Yeah.
that I had worked with in the past with my prior company. So I was the first manager that was hired for Odin Hughes. My employee number was 4. So
Oh,
if
wow.
that says anything, that's kind
Wow.
of how I started. But again, it's relationship building. The person who
Hmm.
picked me as a leasing agent, brand new, to move me to this different property,
Yeah.
she was the one who was president of property management with Odin Hughes. Built
Hmm.
that rapport, built that relationship for a number of years. And she was like, I'm going to this role. I want you to come with me. And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, sure, of course. That's again on my path of what I
Yeah.
want to do. So she picked me as more of a senior manager. And then I did that for a few years. I think that was probably about a year and a half or
Hmm.
so. Business grew. Odin Hughes grew with third party management, with new
Hmm.
construction stuff. And then I got promoted to regional manager.
Yeah. And that's really where I want to go into more details. So, what's the change between going from a site team member as a property manager and then making that jump to regional? And then what does that look like? How do you do
Oh.
it? How can everyone else do it?
Um, I'm just going to be transparent and honest. That
Yeah.
was one of the hardest transitions that I made, to be honest. Going from on site as a property
Yep.
manager, you're kind of the leader of the pack for your
Yep.
community, your building, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
And then you go into this new role as a
Yep.
regional manager, completely offsite. You don't know everything that's going on,
Hmm.
at least at one site. You have 4 or 5 sites now. And
Hmm.
I think that's one position that companies don't really train for. You can get trained to be an assistant manager, you can get
Hmm.
trained to be a property manager. There's a lot of skill sets that are needed
Yeah.
to be a regional manager, and that's more focused on the bigger picture of things.
Hmm.
I remember one of my former coworkers a long time ago. She was talking to me and she was like, the regional manager is essentially the summary. Like the property manager is the detail of
Hmm.
everything and of the building, and that goes up to the regional. And the regional manager is more of the summary to deliver that to whoever they have to deliver that to. So I think one thing and one really nugget of advice
Hmm.
I could give for those looking to go from a property manager to a regional manager
Hmm.
really is to take on as much responsibility as you can as a property manager, be
Hmm.
comfortable in that role, and really
Yeah.
know your property like the back of your hand, and then take on assisting another property with whatever they need
Hmm.
help with. I think that's the biggest thing that you have
Yeah.
to learn is how to know what's going on at your own property and then kind of pick some things from other properties where you can help, things like that. Another big area going from property manager to regional manager is financials. If you're
Yeah.
not a numbers person, being a regional manager is not going to be for you. Like
Yeah.
that's 100% not going to be for you. You have to know your financials. You have to know budgeting. You have to kind of enjoy accounting a little bit
Yeah.
and just expect that and have higher level conversations.
Yeah. And then in terms of for a current property manager right now, one of the things you mentioned is really it's I think it's like the classic advice is take on the role that you are looking to do in a year, whatever it is. So you mentioned that part of that for a
Yeah.
property manager would be taking on responsibilities at another property. But how do you actually do that without, I don't know, stepping on toes, without really coming off as too presumptuous?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying like just go to somebody's property and be like, "I'm going to help you with this." It's not like that. The way to go about it is
Uh,
communication with your supervisor. Obviously, your
yeah.
supervisor, as a property manager, your supervisor is likely going to be either your
Mhm.
district manager or your regional manager. Make
Mhm.
it known to that person, "Hey, I want to move up. I want to be in your position. I want to
Mhm.
just really express your goals and be honest with your goals. You're not here to take somebody else's job. You're here to learn. You're
Yeah.
here to really develop your own skill set. So if you have that communication with your supervisor, one, that
Mhm.
will ping them to kind of put you on their radar, but then
Yeah.
also really assess where you are in your current role and say, hey, if you want to be a district manager slash regional manager,
Mhm.
here's the things I think you should work on.
Yeah.
I'm going to help you work on these things, and this will help you segue into that more supervisory role. Don't
Yeah.
just like guns ablazing go into somebody else's property and say, I'm going to help you because I'm going to be your new boss. Don't do that. Do not do
Yeah.
that. You will make a lot of enemies that way.
Yep. Step on a lot of toes, a lot of enemies. And then, so what are some
Step
like
on a lot of
concrete
toes.
projects that someone could do, or some concrete things that you could do as you take on those additional responsibilities?
What do you mean concrete? Like in the property manager role, or what do you mean?
As you kind of look at taking on additional responsibility at another property, so like what would be like some concrete examples? Is it helping them with financials? Is it looking at resident issues? Like what does that actually look like as you look to kind of test out the regional role?
Yeah, not really resident issues, I would say, unless that's the biggest need for that property, sister property,
Mhm.
whatever it might be. I would
Mhm.
just, for me, it's reaching out to the manager, seeing what they need assistance with, whether it's, they're not quite good on
Mhm.
financials or they struggle with financials a little bit, lending a
Yeah.
helping hand to that person. If they need staffing help,
Mhm.
like that's a big thing. If somebody
Yeah.
needs staffing help, send them your staffing, and then that'll open
Mhm.
some more dialogue with you and this other manager. But yeah, I
Got
think
it.
concrete things is one, just have the wherewithal to kind of see where somebody needs help. And then also just
Mhm.
reach out and say, hey, does somebody need any help with this, that, or the other? And more than likely, people are going to reach out. And that's where you can assist. And
Yeah.
that's what's going to grow your relationships and what's going to grow your knowledge base.
Got it. And then for
And
someone
listen, all
that,
this stuff was in Texas. Like this is what happened in Texas. I went to regional,
yeah,
then I moved to New York. We can get into that in a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah, no, definitely love to hear more of that as well too. And then on the financial side, then how does someone go about really becoming great at the financial side of things?
Find somebody who is very good at financials. Find
Mhm.
a supervisor who loves financials, who is good at
Mhm.
financials, who is willing to teach their ways of doing financials. Every
Mhm.
ownership group is different about going through financials and variance notes and things like that. Every management company is different. The way
Mhm.
I learned as an assistant manager really how to do financials. That's because my
Mhm.
supervisor was on that same path of wanting to move up and be a
Yeah.
VP. She's now an asset manager for the company that I used to work with back in Texas. She was on that trajectory. I remember one time she sat me down and I told her again, I communicated and said, hey, I want to learn this. I want to move up. This
Mhm.
is my goal. She sat me down and she was like, do you want to stay late one night and work on financials? And I did. That's what I did. We closed office at 6 o'clock. We're working
Mhm.
on financials till 8:39 o'clock at night. Again, I'm
Oh
not
wow.
condoning like working this many hours, but again,
Mhm.
you've got to put in a little bit of effort and a little bit of time to perfect your craft. So
Mhm.
she sat me down. We went over a whole financial packet. I had no idea what she was talking about, but it was good
Wow.
to see what she does, kind of get familiar with that. And I did
Mhm.
that a couple more times. And then when I became a property manager, I was more comfortable with it. And I can
Yeah.
remember she became my supervisor. She was a regional manager and I was a property manager. I submitted one of my financials to her and she told me,
Mhm.
she's like, this is one of the best financials I have
Oh
ever
wow.
seen from a new property manager. And my response was, well, you taught me, so I hope so. But yeah, I think you always want to be around people who are better than you. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that in like a in like a superficial way,
Mhm.
but somebody who knows more than you know, somebody who's in a higher position than you are. I think that's also what helped me. I always
Mhm.
gravitated towards people who were not in my position. I
Yeah.
was gravitated towards the assistant managers, the property managers, the region managers, the
Yeah.
VPs,
That
the
makes sense.
owners
Oh.
of companies. Like that's,
Mhm.
you always have to look forward and look up.
Mhm. Got it. And then, so you mentioned that the transition from the property manager to the regional was probably the hardest transition that you've done. So what made it so difficult?
Yeah. I wasn't really trained on how to
Mhm.
be a regional manager. I was with a startup company. I was with a startup management
Yeah.
company. I was brought in because I knew what I knew,
Mhm.
but in the end, you don't know what you don't know. So it's
Yeah.
like when you're thrown into this position of a regional manager, something that
Mhm.
you've wanted for so long, and
Yeah.
it's kind of just like, boom, here you go. You kind
Yeah.
of have to figure it out. It's a lot of trial and error. There was a
Mhm.
lot of error when I
Yeah.
was a regional manager. And I think that's the thing people forget. They want to do it perfectly at the very beginning. You're going to make
Mhm.
mistakes. Please make mistakes so you
Yeah.
can learn from those mistakes and learn how to get better from those things. But that's the reason why it was a hard transition, because I wasn't properly trained, I would
Yeah.
say, to become a regional manager. And that's why I can speak the way I'm speaking, because I know the
Yeah.
importance of taking on a lot more responsibility, asking for the
Yeah.
training, finding those people that can train you. And that's the most important thing.
Got it. And then, do you know any companies that do a really great job with training property managers to go into the regional role? Or how would you, if you had to really structure a way of doing that, like how would you go about it?
So
Is it
I've worked
simply
for
the,
companies that have,
oh, no,
go
you go
ahead, sorry.
ahead. I was
I've
gonna
worked for
say it.
companies that have been acquired by other
Yeah.
companies.
Mhm.
So it's like I would have said those companies, but now they're all now Graystar.
Yeah.
So I would
The king of the
say,
world.
you know what, Graystar is kind of like the Walmart of property management. I don't want to like talk badly about it, but like Graystar is everywhere. Their model is
Yeah.
great. Everything is like
Yeah.
good, and they're expanding. I just read something that they're going to Australia now. But
Oh,
like
wow.
it's so well, Graystar is just so massive. But
Yeah.
anyway, companies that I think are good with training property managers. You know, when I was with Alliance Residential,
Mhm.
that was just recently acquired by
Oh,
Graystar.
it's a great start.
It was a really good company for training. I think
Yeah.
we had platforms for training, we had
Mhm.
mentors, we had peer coaches, things like that.
Yeah.
It was really it was a really good company for training. And I would say that's
Mhm.
trickled over to Graystar. The benefit of Graystar
Mhm.
having acquired all these companies is they take the best parts of these companies. Riverstone
Yeah.
Residential Group, the first company I was ever with, was, if Riverstone was around now, I'd still be with Riverstone. I know
Mhm.
that for a fact.
Oh,
But the
wow.
things about Riverstone was the training, it was the people, it was the
Mhm.
systems, and Graystar adapted some of those things. Same thing with Alliance. They adapted some of the software and the
Yeah.
systems and the training. So Graystar, yeah, Graystar is a good company to be in the property manager role
Mhm.
and to learn from a lot of different people at different levels. It varies by market. Like I've seen Graystar in Florida, I've seen Graystar in Texas, I've
Yeah.
seen Graystar in New York and in New Jersey, and they're all a little bit different. But Graystar is a really good company to to learn the manager role. My current company, Rose Associates, up here in New York City, is also really good as far
Mhm.
as training goes. It's a smaller company, it's more established, but it's still smaller.
Yeah.
I think they have a really good platform. Um, Cortland, I have a really
Mhm.
good friend who works for Cortland down in Texas, and their training platform is also very good.
Yeah.
Don't know much about Lincoln's training, but yeah, I would think those companies are really, really good for training for property managers.
Got it. And then, so how did you then make the move from Odin to Graystar to Alliance and now to Rose Associates?
So the move from Odin to Graystar was
Mhm.
also a move from Texas to New York,
Mhm.
which was necessary, I think, for
Mhm.
my growth and for my advancement. I had built such a great life and career in Texas. If anybody were to see me in Texas and know what I was doing and see kind of where I was going, they'd be like, why did you
Yeah.
move to New York? In my opinion, New York is the greatest city in the country to do real estate. It's super difficult.
Yeah.
It's so hard. I think New Yorkers make it harder on themselves. The government in New York makes it hard to do business. But if you can manage to get through all like
Yeah.
the shit of it all,
Yeah.
it's like then you can really make it anywhere. So I went from Odin Hughes to Gray Star, which was Texas to New York. And I did that because of networking. I did that because I had built relationships. I had actually messaged somebody I had worked with at Riverstone who had went to Gray Star just to kind of see if they knew somebody in the Northeast in the New York market. I have family up here, so I was always coming to New York to visit probably 4 or 5 times a year. And I was like, this is the place for me. So I messaged this person, and he connected me with the talent person up in New York for like the Northeast with Graystar. And, I communicated with them for a little bit of time. I made a couple of trips up to New York. I had a couple interviews with a couple different companies, and I actually got an offer for a position in Chelsea, Manhattan, which is right in Midtown. And it wasn't quite the right fit. I wanted to be in New York very, very badly, but I wasn't going to make a move just for anything. So I actually declined the offer.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I declined the offer, which looking back, I'm just like, whew, it was a smart move, but maybe not the best move at the time. But then, keeping lines of communication open, a year goes down the line in Texas. I am now promoted to a regional manager. I'm doing all of these things, and I kept lines of communication open. And there was just one week that I was like, I need to be in New York. I feel like I'm missing something. And I reached out to one of my contacts that I had made, and she's now my boss currently with Rose Associates, as luck would have it. And I reached out, and she was like, oh my God, I'm so glad you reached out. We've got this, and this coming available. If you're ready to make the move, let me know. I had a couple interviews. I didn't need to fly back up to New York, but had a couple more interviews, and I got the position. From the time I had by the time I reached out, from the first time I reached out to her, I think it was April of 2018, to the time I actually moved to New York City, it was a month and a half. Like I moved
So
my entire
quick.
life. I moved.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quick. I moved my house. I moved my dog up to New York City, which was great. I drove. And then I'm here in New York City with Gray Star. And another pretty difficult transition. You're in a completely different market. If nobody trains you to go from property manager to regional manager, nobody definitely trains you to go from one market to the next, and completely opposing markets that are Austin, Texas to Manhattan, New York City. So to get to New York City, I had to take a step back. I had to take a step back from regional to property manager.
Gotcha. And that's definitely something I'm very curious about. Like when you do move from one market to the next, like what were some of those like big differences that you saw? I know you mentioned that New York laws very, very different, but when you move in the industry, like when you move from state to state or city to city, like what are some of those like big things that you see that would really impact that ability to do your job or just like overall success?
One of the biggest things is knowing the laws. With real estate, it's all about laws. You have to know the laws. You have to know what's going on in your specific market. So that's a big challenge, is not knowing the laws from one place to the other. My career started in Texas. I knew Texas laws like the back of my hand. I could essentially quote the entire TAA lease. In it for like 10, 11, 12 years. Then I come to New York City, everything's just so much different. And not knowing the laws is one big thing. Not knowing the market is another big thing. If there's anything that I can give to people who are to make a change to a different market, is as soon as you get to that market, shop properties. If you already building codes, like kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't know your immediate competition in the area, you're going to fall flat on your face.
Yeah. So what's the best way of actually going about learning the comps? Is it just like visiting? Is it looking up
See, all above, yeah, all that, everything. It's a little different now in the shop, but it's New York was street easy. Just go website. You can secret shop and then learn that way. Whenever you chance to go into the building, that's a whole different dynamic. But yeah, going to the building, shopping them doing life in the area. That's very beneficial as well. Going to a restaurant, going to brunch, going to have drinks, going to like a movie, just doing life in that area will set you apart by leaps and bounds.
Gotcha. So is that more for a leasing agent that's really looking to have a good conversation with a resident to say, oh,
nope, that is for if you don't know anything about what's going on around you, you're not going to be a successful and good property manager.
Really good. And then how was that transition to Rose? And I'm curious to know, like for you, you were listed as the portfolio manager and then now the director for multifamily. Like what does that actually mean? And then how did all your experiences lead to this?
Yeah, so after Greystar, I went to Alliance. Like I said, from Texas to New York, I took a step back to go from regional manager to property manager. Then 8 months with Greystar, I moved my way back up to regional manager with Alliance Residential. As we said earlier, Greystar acquired Alliance.
Yeah.
And then essentially, I kind of took a little bit of a step back again, going from Alliance to Rose as a portfolio manager.
Yeah.
Which was good. I think that was fine. It gave me a little bit of a break after it was in 2020. So it gave me a break after a crazy year. And then with Rose, portfolio manager up to director, really the difference between the portfolio manager role with Rose Associates and the director role is a lot more oversight of units. You have a lot more units, a lot more buildings as a director that I'm supervising compared to portfolio manager. Portfolio manager, I had one client. I had two buildings. It was less than 600 units between the two. So that was for me, that was easy. I had managed up to 1,700 units when I was in Texas. So going from that to 500, I was like, sure, not a big deal. But I think that's the biggest difference for me is just having a lot more oversight and a lot more client contact, a lot more executive contact, being a director of multifamily with Rose.
Got it. And then so for you, I guess like what's made the biggest difference so far? You've kind of touched on a few different themes. So one is really being proactive in career management, to being open to try different things out, whether it's moving from one city to the next or taking a step back in one role. And then you also touched on the importance of relationships. So if you had to give advice, what would you say are some of those like key important things that everyone absolutely has to do that have made the biggest difference for you?
One is flexibility. I think that's been a very big thing for me is flexibility. I've had the means to be flexible. I've worked in different markets. When I was in Texas, I was in so many different markets just in Texas. I was utilized in Chicago for some due diligences and some audits. I was utilized in Oklahoma. I lived in Dallas for a quick minute because I was flexible, and that's what I knew. I knew I had to be flexible. With that comes relationship building. I think it's important to continue having the relationships, no matter what position you're in, whether it's with leasing agent, if it's with the maintenance team, no matter what position you're in, relationships are the single most important thing. And then just know where you want to go. Be intentional about where you want to go, and know what your limits are, and know what your skill set is. Right now, I'm working on starting my own management company, Red Oak Residential. I've already got everything in place for that with my business partner that I was talking with you about earlier. I've got everything set up for Red Oak Residential, but I also came a long way from, as a leasing agent, I was going to be like, I'm going to start a management company. Did I want to? For sure. But I had no
Yeah.
idea how that was going to work. So you have to know your skill set, have to know what you're good at, and accept that.
Yeah.
And really have mentors that can help you along that path. Relationships are one thing. Having a mentor or two mentors or three mentors, that is definitely a necessity, because you can bounce ideas off of people. You can just really, they know you. So you can really kind of get where you should be and where you think you need to go and where you want to go.
Yeah. And I loved how you phrased it earlier, which is really surround yourself with people that are at the next level. So people that you really want to emulate, and that's what's going to challenge you. Those are people that are going to act as mentors, and those are people that are really going to pull you forward. I love it.
Yeah, the most informative conversation I've ever had, really, with anybody in the industry. And as luck would have it, she said some very positive things about me as well. She's like, I've never seen somebody so passionate about property management.
Yeah.
And she was like, where do you see yourself going? Like, and like, what is your goal? And I told her what I'm telling you now is like, to own a management company. Like, and I'm telling this to an owner of a management company. But again, there's no fear there. Like, it's not going to be like, I'm going to take your job kind of thing. Like, this is what I want for myself, and this is what I know I can achieve, and that's what I'm going to be doing. So like you said, surrounding yourself with people who are a little bit better than you, and again, be honest with it, that's going to get you very, very far. What you know and who you know is how you get promotions.
Nice. And then I'll just add one more. I think it's also like it kind of goes in hand. It's like, who knows you? I always like think about it this way is when you are not in the room, you want people to know you exist. It's why every company does advertisements. It's like you drink Coke because they have been advertising for 100 years. So when you're a company, you also want to make sure that people know who you are.
Yeah. And the more people that know who you are as you network, the more people are going to be talking about you when you're not in the room. Hopefully it's all good stuff. You don't want to make an impact.
First step is have a good reputation.
Right.
Nice. And then I'm curious, I love company names. I love branding. So how did you come up with your company name?
It took me a long time to I wanted something that was like jazzy and cool. You have like the Alliance, you have Gray Star, which is just such a powerful name. And it's funny, I figured it out when I was at home at my parents' house in Texas. They live in the country. It's near Medina Lake, Texas. They live out there. They've got a few acres. And, you know, there's just this tree that is like sitting in their backyard that I've seen grow. They've been there for 20 years at this point, and I've just seen it grow so much. And I asked my dad, I was like, what kind of tree is it? It's like, it's a red oak. And I was like,
there it is. There it is.
Residential. And as luck would have it, I took a picture of that exact tree in my parents' backyard. I sent it to one of my friends who does like design work and stuff, and that's the logo. That is the logo. And I think
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, it's important to me to have some kind of like connection to it and to really just have it be meaningful. Because I could have obviously called it, you know, anything. I could have called it Property Company 123. It didn't have any meaning behind it. So Red Oak Residential is very meaningful for me. And, you know, there's a lot of things that are going to happen, and I'm excited to see where it goes, and I'm excited to see it launched here in the very near future. And
Yeah.
yeah, we'll just kind of take it from there.
Keep us posted. Like I love it because I feel like for good companies, there's always a story behind it. For some, it's like super random. You
Yep.
looked outside and saw something. But just I
Yeah.
love that because there's
Well, I'm going to
always like a
plug the
really good meaning
website here
behind
really
it.
quick. I'm going to plug the website. It's
Yeah,
redoakres.com.
nice. That's what I was going to ask next. Like,
So
how
check out the
can
website.
people learn more information? Perfect. All right,
Yep,
awesome. Yeah,
redoakres.com, on social media at Red Oak Residential.
nice. So for that one, like, what are you going to focus on?
So
What's
really for that one, I'm going to focus on the slogan, and the tagline
Mhm,
is uncomplicated property management. I think
mhm,
that's, having been with smaller companies, startup companies,
mhm,
and much bigger companies, there's a lot of fluff that goes
mhm,
on, a lot of systems, a lot of this, a lot of that, and
mhm,
forgetting what the basics are.
mhm,
So for me, as it relates to the resident engagement, as it relates to clients, it's really
mhm.
about uncomplicating the entire process.
Yeah.
Companies a lot of times really focus on residents and resident
Mhm,
engagement, which is very, very good, but they
yeah.
forget the employee. And the
Yep.
employee has to like log into 19 different
Yep.
systems, and it's like, why? And it goes
Yep.
back to the owner. It's like, oh, owner number one, you have to log into this system. Owner number
Yep.
two, this system. And of course, institutional clients have their own way of doing things. I
Mhm,
get it. But property management isn't just for institutional clients. It goes
mhm,
to, like, I manage my own property that's still my home that's still in Texas. You have
mhm.
people that are now a lot more mobile, that have
Yeah.
real estate that they don't necessarily want to sell, but they don't know where to begin with anything as far as
Yeah.
managing a property. That's where Red Oak comes in.
Yeah.
I like to uncomplicate things, make it very, very simple for
Mhm.
any person who wants to be involved in real estate, property ownership, rental property ownership
Mhm.
specifically. So that's where I come in with my company.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's so important, the point that you just made, which is that as an owner, asset manager, VP, or whatever it is, resident experience is really important, but staff experience
Yep.
is just as important. There's a very legitimate
Yep.
reason why real estate has such a high turnover rate. It's a stressful job. It
Yes.
is stressful.
Yeah.
And if you have your teams having to log into so many systems, manage all of this, it does add to the stress as well, too. So I'd
Hmm.
love for you to touch a little bit more on that. So when you think about it, like how should companies think about the staff experience and how that relates to resident experience as a whole?
That is such a loaded question.
It's why I asked it. It's why I asked.
Phew. Like, okay. So let's touch on a couple different things.
Mhm,
As it starts with the systems, like as you said,
mhm,
there's so many systems. These companies now, it's Okta, where it's like, oh,
mhm.
you have this one place with all your passwords. That's
Mhm.
great, but we still have all these systems we have to
Yep.
manage. I think it's really important to hear your employees out. Actually, let me
Mhm,
take it back a little bit. Let's start with the resident
mhm,
experience, the resident engagement. Obviously, that is very, very important. That's
mhm.
super important. Having residents engaged, residents involved. As everybody in property management knows, if we don't have residents, we don't have jobs.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, if you don't have employees, you
Mhm.
don't have a company,
Yep.
and then you don't have happy residents. So I think in the end, it comes down to the associate, listening to the associate, not just
Mhm,
saying, oh, you've got a work-life balance coming to work at this
mhm.
company. Stop that. Like, okay, that's enough. We get it. Work-life balance is very important.
Yeah.
But even more important is, like, I think what's shifting with employees is like not having to be on site
Mhm,
40 hours. I think the pandemic has taught us that we don't have to be on site 40 hours a week, 40
yeah.
plus hours a week. Real
Yeah.
estate doesn't just happen between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Mhm.
People like to say 9 to 5. Let's get real. It's property management from
Yeah.
8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It doesn't happen during that time because a lot of
Mhm.
people are doing their own jobs. So I
Yep.
think flexibility with associate schedules, when they can come in. That's another thing.
Mhm.
Being a stickler about coming in at 9 o'clock in the morning. Somebody shows up at 9:05. They're like, "Oh, you're written up." It's like, come on, we're all grown, we're all adults.
Yep.
Like we all know how to do our job. If you don't know how to do
Mhm.
your job, then you're probably hiring wrong. Is
Yep.
the issue? We have to allow some breathing room for our
Yep.
employees. There's obviously a ton of trainings like Graceful training, things like that. A lot of that's
Hmm.
very important and necessary for insurance requirements for
Hmm.
management companies. But stacking on all these trainings, all these trainings, all these trainings, that's taking away time to perfect the employee's craft or to have a relevant flexibility
Hmm.
to allow associates to breathe and be
Yeah,
comfortable.
yeah. I really love this point about real estate right now. It is the classic model really is the 9 to 5, 9 to 6. That's when people are on staff. But
Eight
again,
to six, let's get real.
yeah,
8
8 to
a.m. to
6.
6.
Yeah, 8 to 6. But again, most people, like you said, are actually at work. I mean, pre-pandemic. And
Mhm.
um, so then what happens the rest of the time? I think it's really interesting because I recently read about Avalon Bay. They are
Mhm.
currently piloting or testing out a model with one of the newer communities where it's completely self-service. So there's no one on site.
Yep.
Everything is like completely
Yep.
self-service. So if you think about the future of real estate, is that something you see really becoming more prevalent? And then what other predictions do you have for what we have to look forward to in the industry?
Yeah, for property management, I do see that that's going to be a thing. Is more of a self-service
Mhm.
platform and a more self-service model.
Mhm.
Obviously, still having that human connection interaction is going to be
Mhm.
necessary. But you mentioned you mentioned not being at the office all the time. What are they going to do outside of that? They're going to live their
Mhm.
life. Like, let's get real.
Yeah.
Work is not our life. I think we all forget that
Yeah.
work is not our life. We still have
Yeah.
doctor's appointments during the day. We still have
Mhm.
all these things that we could probably get done during the day, but
Yeah.
you're stuck sitting at your desk shopping online, if I'm being real, for a couple hours. You could actually spend time running your errands. But
Yeah.
anyway, back to the future of property management. Yeah, I would say it's everything's virtual. Everything is
Mhm.
going to be a lot of things are going to be self-service. It's going to
Mhm.
be why does the leasing agent need to come in with me into the apartment and show me
Mhm.
around this vacant apartment? I'm not going to
Mhm.
steal the apartment. It's an empty apartment. So having like access and self access to these
Mhm.
units outside of a typical 9 to 5 workday,
Mhm.
so people can see units on their own schedule, on their own time, not
Yeah.
feel like they're bombarded by somebody overlooking them. Because let's get
Mhm.
real, a lot of consumers and a lot of future residents still see property managers and sales associates as like
Mhm.
used car salesmen.
Yeah.
That's 1,000% not what we are. That's what a lot of these companies are teaching us not to be, but
Mhm.
that's just still the perception that the public may have of
Yeah.
property management. So going virtual, self-service is
Mhm.
going to be the new thing, and it's going to be even more important now in a post-COVID world
Yeah.
because I don't know where leasing agents been. I don't know where this potential client's been. I don't know who they've been
Mhm.
around, what sicknesses they have.
Yeah.
Any kind of waiver you can sign, but if somebody's not being honest with you, then
Yeah.
you're
Then
not
doesn't
really
really
going to know.
matter.
So virtual self-service and simplicity. I think we forget about the basics when it comes to property
Yeah.
management. We like a lot of fluff. We like to
Mhm.
be the best, the newest, the shiniest. But in
Yeah.
the end, it's like we forget about the customer experience. We forget about kind of that one-on-one time. What again, whether it's virtual or in
Mhm.
person, we're learning now it doesn't necessarily have to be face to face in person. It can
Yeah.
be done virtually. You and I are
Yeah.
in completely different cities and we're having a
Yeah.
good conversation. Like that's just
Yeah.
what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
training is going to have to shift to be more of a virtual platform, virtual
Yeah.
training, and a lot more flexibility for your employees. If somebody can work from 3 p.m. to
Mhm.
8:30 p.m., that's great. Now you're capturing this clientele base that isn't
Mhm.
available during the
Yeah.
be there for them and assist them as somebody who would between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. If you have an early riser that's up at 4:30 in the morning,
and it just works better for them.
Like a big thing. Yeah, if it works better for the client, we need to be, as managers, flexible so what the client's needs are.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that went really well. I really like a lot of the points that you brought up, especially on like staff experience, especially on building relationships, really making those like jumps all over the place. Because I think for a lot of people that are still starting out in the industry, they don't really like know how to think about their career and all the things that they need to learn. So I think this was super, super valuable. Dude, I am excited to learn more about the company.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm excited to launch it. I'm excited to really just hit the ground running. It's going to be great. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting. Congrats.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Very cool.
What else we got? Is that it? Is that everything?
Yeah, that's it. So next step is we have a few more that we are doing, and then we'll do the launch. Want to do the launch with at least 10 to 15 or so. But I'll definitely let you know.
Send me all this. Once you do some editing, do the launch, all that kind of stuff, you could just send me our conversation just so I can kind of promote that.
So definitely send it along.
But yeah, if you need anything from me in the future, let's keep in touch for sure.
And we'll definitely
hope we connect again very soon.
Yeah. And then if you do know anyone else that would be a good guest to have, please let me know. Looking for people that have really made waves in the industry, that can really talk on career development, talk on resident experience, staff experience, and then the future of real estate. Those are really like the key things.
Yes, I've got somebody who you can talk to. He's again, I've talked about him a couple times in this podcast. My best friend, he's in Texas right now. He works for, it's called Presidium. It's an ownership group and they do development. So let me ping him, see if he'd be interested in that. I think that'd be somebody really good to talk to because he's had a different trajectory than I have. He was never an assistant manager. He was never a regional manager. And now he works on the asset management side. Nice. Like it's a completely different.
Yeah, I would love to have
so let me connect with him. Let me connect with him and see if he'd be willing to do that. And I'll do a quick intro, probably via LinkedIn for the both of you guys.
Oh, perfect. Really appreciate it, Josh.
Thanks, Jude. All right, man. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Bye.
All right.